And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge, back once again with another YouTube video. This is another installment in my ongoing saga, Valiant till the last, which is the weekly series in which I review every single deluxe edition by Valiant Comics, one after another. Like this one, Archer and Armstrong, or rather this is called A&A. So we're continuing our Archer and Armstrong comics. We've got getting to this little part of the Valiant universe and getting to the end of it. This is the deluxe edition. Let's talk it through. Standard kind of formatting. This is the new logo and description of it. So whereas the previous two deluxe editions we saw, not in the last couple of weeks, but before that, were just Archer and Armstrong, this is actually A&A, The Adventures of Archer and Armstrong, which is a bit of a mouthful. This is the cover, which I think is a Texas variant of issue 1. And then we have the spine. And again, you'll see this is what it's called, A&A, with the subtitle. So that kind of distinguishes this from the previous volume. It hasn't got a volume number because this is the entire series, a 12-issue maxi series and a couple of spin-offs. And standard back. Quotes, picture, blurb, standard. Let's have a look at this in terms of the inside flaps. We've got usual blurb in the front. We've got creative blurb on the back. Inside we've got yellow end leaves, which is absolutely standard. That's what we had in the previous ones. And yeah, let's have a look at the cover. Gold blocking. Again, this is the new logo they're going for. A&A, Archer and Armstrong, The Adventures of. This is the spine, which looks fine. Nice. And then a nice clean back. One thing I'll point out is this actually isn't brilliant, because this spine feels, just the card they've used here is slightly too wide. What it does is it gives the kind of a slight wiggle. I don't know if you can see this, a slight wiggle to the spine. They could have trimmed maybe 2 millimeters of this and had a nice snug spine. But in this case, as you'll see, if I do this and I push it so it's flat on the back, you've got this weird lumpy extra bit here in the front. And similarly, if I push the front, you'll see there's an extra bit on the back. In other words, this bit of board is a bit too wide. I know it's a subtle thing. You don't really notice it. I'm quite conscious of these things in my deluxe hardcovers because, you know, I'm a perfectionist. But yeah, that's slightly annoying on the build quality. Other than that, the actual build quality with the binding, the sewn binding and everything else is absolutely fine. Paper quality is fine. This is fine. The embossing is fine. It's just, yeah, why? It's ridiculous. Shout out in the comments below if you've got the same thing on yours or if you don't, just so I know if it's a production issue or just mine's a one-off mistake. Anyway, here we have A&A, The Adventures of Archer and Armstrong. Let's dive into it. It's 3 volumes. The first one is called In the Bag, and that's issues 1 to 4. Second one is called Romance and Road Trips, issues 5 to 8, and then it's got some like little mini stories in the back, I guess, which get collated here. And then we have the third one, which is Andromeda Estranged, and then we have the final one, which is just other appearances. I don't know if that's his own trade paperback or if those are just 2 random one-shots they've included in here. I think it's the latter. I don't think there's a 2-issue trade paperback floating around called Other Appearances. I think these are just things they've thrown in here, which is good because it's nice to have a complete set. So here we have it, In the Bag, first trade paperback arc, 4 issues. Those are the covers. And yeah, this is decent. Slightly different artwork than we've seen in the previous ones. It's slightly more cartoony, as you can see. Slightly more caricatured. Caricatured isn't the right term. It's got a slightly more kind of bulbous, angular kind of look. It looks a little bit more animated. It's perhaps even slightly anime if you look at this sort of stuff. But it's not bad. You get used to it very, very quickly. And the story itself is decent. It's a standard kind of Archer and Armstrong fare. It's weird. With Archer and Armstrong, like, the previous volumes dealt a lot with Archer's backstory and Armstrong's backstory. Armstrong's backstory being just kind of like drunken hedonism. Archer's being about being a master assassin as part of a cult. This tries to keep both this thread going, but in a slightly disjointed way. So, for example, throughout all the issues you have... Ooh, that's fine. Throughout all these issues, you have little scenes of Mary Maria, who was in the previous stories as well, and her troubles with the various cults of the sect and etc., etc. But it's very, very distinguished from and demarcated from the otherwise Archer and Armstrong story. And so, whilst this Mary Maria stuff is going on, apart from the first arc where there is some overlap, after that it's just a complete standalone thing. And I kind of wonder why they bother doing that. I guess it kind of makes sense in the sense that Archer and Armstrong's story is now very much just a buddy story. There's nothing really there about Archer and his background and the sex and the religious extremism that formed him and all that sort of stuff. It's just them going on goofy adventures together. So to try and keep that sect and conspiracy related kind of theme going, they've essentially had to introduce this character, or rather reintroduce this character, and have her adventures being their own thing, entirely separate, even though the story is kind of like told randomly interspersed throughout this story. So it's kind of a weird decision, tonally speaking. I'm not sure I'm a massive fan of it. That's the first arc. Then we get into the second arc. Just in the second arc, just to point out, issue 5 we have seen collected previously. Issue 5 was collected in a deluxe hardcover of Faith, which we reviewed ages ago. But otherwise, again, decent story, similar sort of art as we've just spoken. But yeah, like I say, it feels like much more of this story relates to just Archer and Armstrong goofing around, and the kind of the depth and the more interesting narrative concept around it has kind of been lost. And so as a result, they have this completely separate now, and by issue 5 and 6 it is completely separate, have a completely separate thread about Mary Maria and her working this cult of assassins and so on. And they just remain completely divergent storylines all the way through. So for the rest of the issues, this storyline thread here is just a completely distinct thing. And while it's not a bad storyline, I do wonder why they bothered having it in here at all. Something to point out as well, actually, in this third arc, is that each issue ends, and then it has a 2 or 3 page, or 4 page, as you can see here, little backup story. Now, it's a bit annoying because it's badly put together, unfortunately. I don't want to criticise Valiant's collected edition department, but this is a bad call, because what they've done is they've said here, whoever wrote this was right. Issue 5, issue 6, issue 7 and 8. And then at the end, they could have just collected the 3 backup stories, Davy and the Bagmaker's Apprentice, in one bit. And that's exactly what I was expecting based on the contents page. Unfortunately, that's not what they actually did. What they did was they basically just had those at the end of the appropriate issues. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of disjointed. It basically means when I'm reading it, I've got to flick back and forth to get to the next bits and pieces, which is frankly kind of annoying and frustrating. I didn't really appreciate the way that had been set up like this. So you have to flick from one issue. So hold on, let's see. Yeah, so you got this bit, which is page. There's 1 page there. There's 2 pages here. The 3rd page here, to be concluded, and then you've got the Archer and Armstrong issue, and then the story's concluded. And it's kind of like, why did you do this? Like what is the point? It would have been better to have all of them at the end, not beforehand. I wouldn't have had them before issue 5 because actually that wouldn't have worked for narrative reasons. But it would have made sense to collect it the way it's collected here. But for some reason, it's not collected the way it's collected here. So boo hiss to that, basically. Okay, so then moving on, what is the next character arc? The next character arc is this, Andromeda Estranged, issues 9, 10, 11, 12. Interesting story. Ignore the opening artwork, it's terrible, but then the story picks up. The one thing I'd point out is that it does have a main character in it, this guy in the golden mask, who's from the one shot we mentioned a few videos ago, which is Archer and Armstrong, the 1%ers. And you don't need to read that to understand this, but again, given this character is in this, it's weird the 1%er issue wasn't collected in any of the previous deluxe editions. So again, bit of an oversight by Valiant there. Otherwise, you've got the story, again, the Mary Maria thread continues entirely in isolation, totally separate from the Archer and Armstrong story, but nonetheless pages interspersed throughout, which is not necessarily confusing, but does feel tonally disjointed. We've got issue 11 here, which is fine, and then we've got issue 12, which takes us to this. Then we have other appearances. Okay, so with other appearances, we have 2 particular issues. These are one-shots, and much like the 1%er issue that I mentioned a few videos ago, these are kind of standalone, relatively speaking. The first one is Immortal Brothers, The Tale of the Green Knight, which is a retelling of the Arthurian legend of the Green Knight. Not especially interesting as a retelling either, but there we go. And then we have this one, which is Armstrong and the Vault of Spirits. As one might expect with Armstrong, by Vault of Spirits, we're talking about alcohol. So this is an okay story. It also features Ivar Time Walker, which is nice. It's short, doesn't really have any impact on anything, but it's not a bad story. And then we've got the standard gallery here. These are the gallery features, black and white. No real DVD commentary of any kind, just black and white artwork, alternate covers, stuff like that. And that was the end of Archer and Armstrong. That's the end of this thread of the Valiant universe, what I'm calling the Archer and Armstrong thread, which is distinct from the Eternal Warrior thread and that sort of thing. What I would say is I am conscious, I am aware, I'm not blind to the fact that another Archer and Armstrong series has started coming out called Archer and Armstrong Forever. At the time of filming this, that series hasn't finished, and so I'm not going to read it. So we're not looking at it for next time. I'll read it at some point, but we're not looking at it for next time. So here we are, end of the Archer and Armstrong thread. Is this a decent story? Yeah, this is okay. If this was just by itself and there was no Valiant universe, you could read it, you could follow it. I probably wouldn't have picked it up, not even as a hardcover, not even as a paperback. But I have it, it's part of my collection, so yeah, this is fine. This is fine. Got no problem with that. In terms of what I'm reading next, I'm kind of torn at this point. So there's two final sets of deluxe editions for me to go into. One is the Quantum and Woody part of the universe, and the final bit is the Shadow Man Magic part of the universe, which of course I'm slightly dreading because I really am not a fan of magic in all these various permutations. So, I guess I'll do Quantum and Woody first, but before that, there are a few straggler series that I want to cover. That haven't as yet been collected and have come out relatively recently. So on that note, let's pick them up over the next few weeks. So for next week's homework, why not read the series Armourclads, which came out relatively recently in the last year or so. It's either a 4-issue or a 6-issue miniseries. Let's read that next time. That's your homework. Alright, thanks for watching everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at I am Thomas Judge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.